So, according to the Steam hardware survey, as of June 2022, the average gamer has GTX 1060, 16 gigs of RAM, a quad-core CPU at 2.7 GHz, all paired with a 1080p monitor. And if you looked at the comments section of my video on the i3, you would think that a quad-core CPU isn't worth the sand it's made out of. And in this video, we're going to find out if that's true. I'm going to benchmark and use this system as a quote-unquote normal gamer would, meaning games open, guides up, and Discord's on. And we're going to see if it's time to upgrade the average gamer. So our test bench today isn't quite the average PC, it's a little different, but hear me out. We've got a GTX 970, not quite the best, but it'll do. It performs about the same as a GTX 1060, and it has 3.5 gigs of usable VRAM, so on the lower end toward the 1063 gig. An i5 7600K is also in this rig with a 240mm AIO. This AIO is, however, on its last legs. Sorry to say it. The cooler still works, but the CPU is hitting 100 degrees Celsius under full load and not boosting. So it's staying right about it. It's 3.8 gigahertz base clock instead of its full 4.2 gigahertz boost. It's not the fastest DDR4 in the world, but it's 16 gigs at 2666 megahertz with no XMP profiles. There's an old MSI motherboard in there that I'm surprised has Wi-Fi and still works. A 500 gig Samsung 850 EVO and a Corsair CX600 power supply. Again, surprised it hasn't blown up yet. How did I come in contact with this PC, you may ask? Well, I built it for a friend in 2017 that recently built a new system and gave me this old one. But how does it perform? Alright, so for our first game today, we have Enlisted, a free-to-play shooter by Gaijin Entertainment, the same people who did War Thunder and World of Warships. It's a great free-to-play game, and I love to include games like these because people like to play free-to-play games, especially on older hardware. But how did we do? So I had to turn the settings down to about medium at 1080p to achieve these results. We were able to get a minimum of about 54, a maximum of 114, with an average 84. I didn't notice any frame dips, stuttering, any weird behavior with the game. The only weird thing I noticed with the game is always with this game. And that's that MSI Afterburner doesn't like to play with it. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner, that is basically the bottom corner of my overlay. That's supposed to be in the top left, not the bottom left. I'm supposed to be able to see about 10 more lines of code for that, but let's move on to the next one. Next up, we have Doom Eternal. I'm not sure why, but a lot of people tend to play this game, and everybody seems to be benchmarking it, so I figured I'd throw it in there because everybody else is, so it kind of adds a pretty good comparison point to other systems out there. But how did we do? And again, we are at medium 1080p. We achieved a minimum of 57, a max of 133, and an average of 69. Nice. But that puts it very similarly right next to Enlisted in terms of performance. What do we have next? So next up we have Baldurs Gate 3, a newer game, kind of more of a difficult to run game, or actually I guess as far as new games it's not that difficult to run, but for this old PC, kind of is. So how did we do? Well, we were able to get a minimum of 11, a maximum of 47, with an average of about 33. That doesn't sound like a lot, especially with medium settings at 1080p, but that is a more than playable experience, especially because this game plays like a real-time strategy game. So I'd say this is very playable. Next up we have Battlefield 5. Not the newest Battlefield game, but the newest one I would play. I tried 2042, didn't really like it. But anyway, moving on. We were able to get a minimum of 34.7 FPS, so closer to about 35. We got a maximum of 61 with an average of 52. Now, why is the maximum and the average so close? Well, if you look in the top left corner, the issue isn't actually the GPU. The GPU, the most of the time during this game, was pinned at about 70 or so percent, while the CPU was pinned at 100 degrees and 100% utilization the entire time. So while yes, we were at medium 1080, if we crank the settings up to about ultra, we might not notice too much of a difference here, which is mind-boggling to me, to be able to basically adjust your frame rate, or to adjust your settings in your game and not see a frame impact, because the bottleneck you're running into isn't actually with the CPU, or isn't actually with the GPU, it's with the CPU. Weird thing, but okay, moving on. And for our last title of the day, we've got Cyberpunk 2077. Again, the game is being run at medium 1080p, and you'll notice I've got two sets of benchmarks going. One is this PC, and the other is my main PC, you know, the PC I use all day, every day, with a 3080 and i7 12700K. So, how did this PC do at medium 1080p? We were able to get a minimum of about 15, a maximum of 41, with an average of just under 30, with a nice cinematic and smooth 27 FPS. Doesn't sound too great, especially when you contextualize that with what my PC did. A minimum of 58, a maximum of 173, with an average of 136. At ultra, not medium. So, that leads us into our next section. Is it time to upgrade the average PC? So personally, I say, well, it depends, just like all things do, because the performance is relative. If you're more than okay with this performance that you're getting at 1080p with these brand new titles, yeah, you can make this PC limp along for another few years, especially if you drop the resolution down to 720p and are willing to go to 720p medium. You're more than capable at that point of pushing this PC probably another 2 or 3 years to being able to play new titles. I wouldn't be surprised if this PC does end up performing decently well, you know, all things considered, with Starfield when it drops. Yeah, it's no 3080 i7 rig, but honestly, it's fine. But on the other hand of that, you're definitely missing out on a lot of performance, and especially with these newer titles like Cyberpunk and Baldurs Gate 3 or even Battlefield 5, it gets difficult to run, and if you're playing an action-packed game like Cyberpunk at 30 FPS, it can be fairly difficult. And I didn't even include Cold War into the benchmarks because the game was just a stuttering mess. CPU couldn't keep up. It wasn't playable. I had to play against bots just to get the benchmarks done. I couldn't do it. But, you know, like I said, if you're okay with the performance, yeah, keep it. You can probably get another couple of years out of it, and then, you know, maybe make it a 10-year PC and build another one in a couple of years. Or, hey, maybe if you're decided it's time to upgrade, it's time to upgrade. Now's a great time. And I think NVIDIA's going to kick out 40 series a little bit to, you know, sell some of these 30 series GPUs that they're discounting at almost half off. But anyway, that's just my thoughts about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, maybe found it useful. If you did, don't forget to smash that like button as aggressively as you can. Subscribe and spread the videos. See you in the next one.